Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the On the Record podcast. I'm your host, Devin. This week, my guest is my good friend, Daniel Guerrero, writer for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Devin. Happy to be here. I feel like I've been using that term a lot, that saying happy to be here a lot lately. But it's cool to see you, cool to hear you. Looking forward to catching up and just having a chat. It feels like we haven't talked in a while.
Yeah, I know it has been a while. For the listeners who don't know, that Daniel and I, we used to work together at the Daily Aztec because we both went to San Diego State, and now he's doing big things up in St. Louis.
I wouldn't say big.
You're covering the minor league team in St. Louis, and the Cardinals just, they're in the playoffs, and you were there at the last game of the season. Obviously, big things, exciting things. We'll get to that in a second. But first, I wanted to talk about your career and just how you got to where you are, because before COVID, we were all doing very different things. Before you were at the DA, and even before that, you had this internship at NBC7. You were going before that. Let's even start earlier. You were at Fullerton College. You were a sports editor there. You're doing a lot of big things there. Looking back at your career so far, with all these trips that you've had at all these different places, what job do you feel like kind of helped you out the most to prepare you to get to where you're at now? You feel like?
Well, it's weird. So I know, like you said, it's felt like a while since 2020. I think just because everybody was kind of lost and confused for the most part. It's normal. It's a pandemic. There's a lot going on. So, I'm fortunate to have had some opportunities post-grad. But when it comes to the things, I guess, that help prepare me for the post-grad life, it's definitely the Daily Aztec. Being a part of that. And then, like you even mentioned, that was kind of a deep cut going back to Fullerton College. That's kind of where, that's really where I started getting involved in student media for the Hornet, which is a student newspaper there. But the Daily Aztec, I think, was the biggest thing that helped me kind of get prepared for the post-grad life. And it's kind of weird because I tried to prepare the best, but even now, after graduation, it's like there's still a lot of things that you feel lost and confused on, just because you can prepare as much as you can, but nothing is like real life. But at least the Daily Aztec was kind of like a simulation of that. It gave me a lot of chances to practice, a lot of chances to try different things, and obviously meet a bunch of great people. Everybody in that newsroom, everybody that we got to work with, who I consider a lot friends. Some people my closest friends. That was really probably the biggest thing for me, just because it gave me the chance to just write about whatever and cover whatever on campus or in sports. So that's definitely the biggest part.
Yeah, and I would agree to that, because it's like I feel like a lot of, especially young journalists that are in college, right? You're kind of like looking for opportunity, and it's almost hard to find it in some places, because, some schools may not have a school newspaper, or some, jobs may not be willing to get open to college students, and you have interns and stuff like that. And so I feel like, at least for me, the DA was kind of like a good stepping stone. And it was also kind of funny too, in the same sense, because it was like it brought together all these people that necessarily you wouldn't think that way would all meet together outside of school or in some other sort of fashion. But we all kind of had like our own camaraderie, in a sense. Would you say that?
Oh, definitely. And I think you can even look at that on like a section by section basis. I felt like we were really close within the sports section. To this day, we have our fantasy football league that still survives and still is going on. I hope, we continue that for as long as we can. But we definitely had that camaraderie. We definitely had that, because I feel like being on the school paper there kind of, like you said, brought together a bunch of people who might not have ever crossed paths. And it's true, just because we have different interests. Some of us weren't even journalism majors. Some people were political science majors or Spanish majors or what have you. But yeah, we definitely benefited from each other and learned from each other. I think we did push each other to be better. I think that we saw that a lot in the sports section in fall 2019. because we started doing new things. I mean, we had never done on-camera stand-ups, and Aaron pushed for that. We had never really kind of had as big of a social media presence, and there were a lot of people who, kind of made that one of the things that they really wanted to do, like Amber. I mean, who's, now in Iowa, an on-air reporter who, same thing, she knew what she wanted to do, and she got to practice that at the DA. And there were a lot of people that in the same situation, that they had an idea of what they wanted to do post-grad, and they made it their goal to get as much reps in the DA as they can to help kind of forge a path moving forward. And I mean, like you said, I mean, we kind of took a lot of pride in trying to win the best section. I know we felt snubbed in spring 2020, which is funny because I felt like I won both ways, just because I also wrote for news. So
Yeah.
so you guys didn't three-peat. I technically four-peated. So if you go back to fall 2018, probably I'm kind of like the Steve Kerr of best section awards. I mean, I didn't play a huge role, but I was on the team, like the AC Green of the Lakers. I mean, you kind of forget how many rings that guy has, but yeah, I mean, so it was a lot of fun. I mean, and I just felt, I mean, it was fun being, it's one of those moments that I know people kind of look back on as like, oh, I mean, the college days. And I mean, I just had a lot of fun. I mean, and being a part of the newspaper meant a lot to me. The friends I made there meant a lot to me. And like I said, we still keep in touch. So, and we still kind of, push each other now, I guess. I mean, when we talk about some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, certainly. No doubt about it. And I feel like, at least for me, we always talk about like that sort of that bond that kind of holds us all together. I think it's kind of a testament to how, like, even with COVID, right, we were kind of facing all these different challenges where it was sort of a struggle to try and, not a struggle, but I would say that like our reporting kind of changed in a sense, right? Because we couldn't, fans weren't at the games. We couldn't necessarily do the things that we were able to do before because of COVID restrictions and things like that. With all the jobs that you've had now and looking back, right? I mean, have you always wanted to do baseball and be a baseball reporter? Like since you started, or were you kind of always focused on something else?
Oh yeah. I mean, it took me a little while, I guess, to figure out what I wanted to do. So I'll try to keep this short, but so I graduated high school, scraped by, honestly, had no idea what I wanted to do in college, enrolled at Fullerton, because obviously, like, I didn't feel like I didn't apply to any 4 years coming out of high school. Like, I knew I wasn't gonna make the cut. I wasn't gonna waste my time and money on sending in those applications. So I was like, I mean, Fullerton would be a good place to start. It'll give me a little while to figure out what I want to do. And before I graduated high school, I did kind of think like it'd be cool to do something in sports, whether it's like sports reporting or broadcasting or something like that. But I had zero clue what that job actually looked like or how to even get to that point. So when I got to Fullerton, I just knocked out all my general eds the first 2 semesters that I was there. Well, first 2.5. No, sorry. No, first 1.5. Okay. So yeah. And then first 1.5 semesters that I was there. And then spring 2017, I took my first journalism class with one of my favorite professors, Julie Patel, who is now the head of the journalism department at Cal State LA, if I have that correct. We still keep in touch every now and then. But yeah, she was one of my favorite teachers. Also, same thing, kind of pushed me to be better. And helped me a lot. So I remember going into that thinking like, man, I only have like 3 semesters left before I need to transfer. I really hope I like this. And I did struggle. And luckily, like I said, I had a really great first professor. And then after that, I got into the student newspaper. And at Fullerton College, it's the way it's structured, like the student paper or student media is a part of the courses. So enrolled in those courses and was writing for the school paper, was writing for the Fullerton College Magazine, joined the Spanish paper, which was kind of in a weird stage just because we had the resources for it, but we really didn't have the numbers to produce like the English side did. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, and it was really along that path that I was like, I want to do sports and I want to do baseball specifically. It's really the only sport that I've ever been interested in, the sport that I've really watched. I mean, outside of like fantasy football, and in like Mexican soccer, whether it's Atlas or the Mexican national team. I mean, there really isn't any other sport I followed, and I just thought if I want to do this, I mean, I got to kind of go all in on it, and just kind of hope that things work out. So I feel really lucky to be still covering baseball. I mean, it's only my first year at the Post-Dispatch, second season covering it, including this internship I did at MLB.com last year, which is great. But yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do it, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, there's really no other way to describe it. I mean, I get to be at the ballpark every night, which is a ton of fun.
Yeah, I remember you would always, I don't know if it was on your Twitter or on your Instagram, but you would always post like about the ballpark food or whatever. And I was like, man, like just living the life, dude, and being down there at the ballpark and getting to cover all these teams. When you covered San Diego State baseball and, that team, and then you covered it, before COVID, during COVID and all that stuff. And then now you're covering these professional teams. Do you feel like is the process by which you go about reporting and writing stories, is it still the same as when you were doing it in the DA, or have you kind of adapted and changed a bit?
Oh, no, it's changed just because there's a bigger demand of what, I guess, the stories you're writing. Just because like with the DA, I mean, I was literally showing up like minutes before first pitch, then just talking to, a couple people on the field after the game and head coach after the game and writing a game story off of that. But now it's like, I mean, you show up basically 4 hours before first pitch when the ballpark opens. I guess it's really weird because like 2021 was different because it was all through Zoom basically. So, I mean, you're just logging on to pregame Zooms with the manager or whatever players were speaking pregame that kind of PR was giving you. But like now in like the post Zoom era where clubhouses are open, field access is free. You're showing up 4 hours before the game, going to the manager's pregame session, talking to players pregame in the clubhouse. So since I'm on the minor league side, I'm not writing notebooks or writing pregame stuff, but last season with MLB.com, when I was a fill-in, kind of like a backup, subbing in for a lot of people on beats, I was writing notebooks, I was writing pregame stuff. And then obviously the way you cover games is different just because, you're on tighter deadlines. I think just like I said, in the role that I am in now, where I'm covering the minor leagues, it is a lot different just because I'm writing a lot more features. I'm writing a lot more kind of quick hit, notebook type stuff on player performances and updates. But I mean, features are kind of the main thing that I am also kind of doing, especially now, heading into, or now that the minor league regular season is over and all that's left is the fall league. And we have obviously the postseason coming up. So, I mean, I'm still just, working on features, still doing kind of other minor leagues, helping out with postseason coverage. But I mean, yeah, definitely it's answered the long way to answer that question. It does change just because, you're not writing just one game recap from this. I mean, the guys our main beat writers like Derek Gould and Rick Hummel, who have been at the Post-Dispatch for almost longer than I've been alive. They, same thing, yeah, they handled notes, they handled the game or whatever side story. I mean, there's times where I write a side story off the game, but yeah, it's a lot different process just because, like I said, the demand or I guess just there's more stories, required coming off of that coverage.
Yeah, certainly. And everybody talks about with athletes, there's a welcome to the pros moment. And I always feel like for journalists, there's a welcome to journalism moment that everybody kind of goes through. Did you ever have that sort of moment?
Yeah. So, I mean, even at the Daily Aztec, there were kind of little moments, different news stories that had kind of where it was really weird. But I mean, especially post-graduation, I think probably that one first welcome to the pros moment was, I'd probably say even spring training last season, because I had gotten hired by MLB.com and then basically everything was on Zoom. I mean, it's not like I was in Arizona. I mean, I was writing stuff from literally my room in Anaheim. But I mean, yeah, you log on to Zoom and it's, now former Angels manager Joe Madden talking, or there was a Zoom with Mike Trout. which feels really weird just because it's Zoom, but at the same time, it's like, hey, this is, a big league manager. And then there was like another moment where the first game I showed up to and went into like a major league press box. I mean, I was super nervous because I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to like end up in the wrong place and get like a credential revoked or get in trouble. So I was like really asking like a million details of, the ushers of where do I need to walk to. But even that was like a really weird moment just because there was a preseason, it was a spring training game at Angel Stadium because they do like the Freeway Series against the Dodgers, and it was an empty stadium, which was really weird. But also, seeing like the other people on the beat, meeting them for the first time was one of those moments. And then the more the season has gone on, the more and more I see like, okay, so this is kind of what like the beat writer life is all about. Going to Florida for Cardinal spring training, that was a huge welcome to the pros moment just because I got to travel all the way to Florida and was there for like 2.5 weeks. Same thing, I mean, just covering baseball, but also figuring out, because this role that I'm in, it's new on the minor league side, but figuring out, what this coverage is going to look like, going into the clubhouse for the first time and just being in there was a huge welcome to the pros moment. Getting my first Cardinals opening day. I mean, opening day, everybody kept telling me like it's special here in St. Louis just because this is a baseball city. I mean, there's a connection between the team and the city and the fan base and just the people that live in St. Louis and even the region. It's something that people, they truly care about. So like seeing opening day, I mean, they had the Clydesdales out there. They had all the Cardinals Hall of Famers, the motorcade, the players come in on like a motorcade around the warning track. They have all the World Series trophies out there. They have, it's a spectacle. And I mean, that was a huge moment just because it's like, okay, like this is, the organization that I'm covering for the flagship paper here. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of little moments, I mean, not little moments, a lot of big moments that have kind of, I went from that, that it just feels crazy. I mean, it feels still kind of like a dream. It's still, there's still moments that I feel like, are going to be more welcome to the pros moments, just because the more I guess I'm on the beat, the more responsibilities I'll have and the bigger things I'll cover.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume, I mean, even next Friday, I mean, when the wild card series starts in St. Louis, I know that for sure will be a welcome to the pros moment just because I've never covered a playoff game. And same thing, it's Cardinals baseball and it's the playoffs. And this is like, as a Derek Gould, our lead writer, once wrote, that this is the playoffs are the time that Cardinals become like true Cardinals, just because like this is where Cardinals are tested and among like they're compared to like Cardinal greats. Just that's a measuring stick of baseball. I hear is playoff success.
Wow, that's like incredible. Just like going through that, what you all said, and just those little moments. I feel like you're right in that sense because it's like, every I mean, and even in every journalism job, right? We all have these like big sort of not high pressure, but sort of these sort of huge situations that we all go through. And I mean, I can kind of
definitely
attest to that too, because it's like, at least for me, my sort of welcome journalism moment, and I've told other people this too, was like we had I was producing one of the shows, and we had a plane crash in Santee, or a plane crash into a home, killing a UPS driver, and it caused this huge uproar. I mean, and then we ended up sending all these crews here, and the producer of that show ended up nominating it for an Emmy, and it ended up winning.
Yeah, and congrats, dude. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, thank you. And like, and what's funny is I tell people this story too, is like I was not supposed to work that day because it happened on a Monday, and I was actually off. But then somebody called out and they subbed me in last minute. So because I subbed in, and the next shift ended up winning an Emmy, which is even crazier for me.
Yeah, I mean, things line up that way, man. Sometimes it's unexpected that really works out.
Yeah, and it's just like those moments. I feel like those high pressure moments. I mean, I feel like it kind of builds you in a sense, because it's like every journalist, you kind of go through these little things covering like a small spot news story or whatever, like writing your first game or whatever. But like you said, I mean, you wrote this great feature about Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina from the competitors. You talking to Charlie Morton, right? That was in the Dispatch today.
Yeah, that was on our website, and that was like a season-long project that I had worked on, just because it included a lot of voices from different players from around the league. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm super nervous for writing it. Felt like one of those things where it's like I have to hit it, and hopefully, people like it. Obviously, you question yourself, but I mean, yeah, I mean, thank you for reading it. I mean, really, it's nice. It's nice to hear when people say like, "Oh, hey, like I read your story," because it's like I know not. I mean, we write these things to be read, so thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And like, on that topic of, you're covering this team that has such a long standing tradition, like the Cardinals. I mean, and Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina, and it's his last season. Same with Pujols. I mean, Pujols, he's trying to chase 700. He ended up getting it. I mean, just like, you being a reporter and just going through that. And then you're at the last game of Albert Pujols at, Busch Stadium. I mean, what's just that whole experience and that atmosphere like being in that press box in that moment?
Well, I'll even take you back to his first game back here on opening day. I remember Ben Fredrickson, who's one of our columnists and is really taking me under his wing here in St. Louis. We talked about it in spring training after Pujols signed. I mean, that was a huge moment, right? Albert Pujols got DFA'd by the Angels last year, which is actually kind of an interesting thing because I not covered that when that happened. I was on Angels coverage when it happened just because Mark Feinsand, who's a national reporter for MLB.com, broke the story, and I was filling in for Angels beat reporter Rhett Bollinger that day. So I was at the ballpark when Pujols got DFA'd, and then obviously he signed with the Dodgers. His status of returning in 2022 is up in the air, and everybody's thinking, this guy's sitting on 680 something home runs, one of the greatest hitters of all time, one of the greatest players in general of all time. Could St. Louis be a match for him to return? I mean, it could be, farewell season. And then obviously the lockout happens, and that was long. And then, finally in March, things get going again. Lockout ends, new CBA is agreed upon. And in the new collective bargaining agreement, there's the universal DH, and everybody's like, "Whoa, maybe this is the chance for Albert Pujols to come back." I mean, and be, have opportunities to play, just because, I mean, the Cardinals already have Paul Goldschmidt, who's having an MVP caliber season, and Albert Pujols isn't going to play every day. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt's, still one of the top first basemen in the league. And now you have the DH, so it's like, hey, this could happen. And then just one day in March, or really overnight in March, Albert Pujols re-signs with the Cardinals. I know our lead writer, Derek Gould, broke the story. And yeah, so he comes back, and I kept hearing, how special Albert Pujols is to the city of St. Louis and the Cardinals fan base, and growing up in Anaheim, seeing him get to Anaheim when I was in high school, how that all played out was a lot different, just because it was a whole different Albert. I mean, he battled injuries. There was some underperformance, obviously with age, but I mean, yeah. So I mean, opening day comes, and everybody's like, "Man, this is going to be crazy." Albert's back, and sure enough, I mean, they announce his name. Starting Albert Pujols, everybody goes crazy. His first at bat, everybody goes crazy, and that's how it was throughout the year. Like every at bat that he took, it was a must see moment, and it got even more must see as he got closer and closer to 700 homers. I remember his first home run back at Busch. It was against the Royals sometime in April. People went crazy, and people just kept going crazy the whole year. And same thing for Yadier Molina. I mean, who was one of the greatest defensive catchers of all time. Same thing. I mean, people love these guys. Even Adam Wainwright, who nobody knows if he's retiring this year, but also one of the Cardinal greats. So we flash forward to this last weekend, and it really started on Friday, just because this Friday was the first game back after Pujols hit 700, and they had a big ceremony, which was crazy. I mean, people packed the place. Saturday, people packed the place. And then Sunday, obviously, they have that big pregame ceremony honoring Pujols and Molina. And I mean, it's just one of those moments I feel like fans, not just in baseball, but in sports in general, look back and are like, hey, this was like their farewell ceremony. Obviously, they have 3 more regular season games left, and they have whatever lies ahead in the playoffs. But this was their Busch Stadium regular season farewell, and it was it was one of those things where people, like you could tell. I remember showing up at the ballpark yesterday. It was a 1:00 game, so gates open media gates open at 9, but the regular fan gates don't open, I think, until like 11. And I was there sort of like, it was maybe like 10:15, and the line to get in was just all the way down the street. I mean, it was insane. I had to kept saying like, excuse me, like, and kind of make my way through the crowd just to get to the entrance. But yeah, it was insane. I mean, I was even worried I wasn't going to find parking when I showed up.
Wow.
Just because that's just how much it meant to the fan base in the city. So I mean, yeah, seeing these two future Hall of Famers get honored on the field, seeing just hearing what people like the owner, Cardinals chairman Bill DeWitt Jr. had to say. I mean, hearing what other players had to say about Albert and Yadi in this farewell. I mean, it was one of those things that was special for baseball and special for St. Louis. And I mean, it was cool to see that from the press box and see that kind of be on the other side of these things. So, I mean, yeah, definitely one of those moments that, I'll remember.
Yeah, for sure. And like when they, that moment, I think it was the 5th inning where they all left together, right? And you hear this roar from the crowd. I mean, what was that like from the press box when you're seeing, Yadi, Waino, and Albert just all leave the field at the same time?
Well, I don't think we knew it was all going to happen like that. I remember somebody had asked pregame during the Oliver Mole Cardinals manager's pregame session if that was a possibility. He said, if it lined up, it would have, it would be a possibility for Albert and Yadi to exit at the same time. Did we think Waino was going to come out at the same time? No. Obviously, it was kind of a down. He struggled yesterday against Pittsburgh. So I mean, it felt weird just because it was obviously a moment that was special. I mean, 3 players who defined Cardinals baseball for the last 2 decades. 3 three Cardinal greats really exiting the field during the final regular season home game, all at the same time. They've all come up together. Minus Albert's time in Anaheim, they've all played, Cardinals baseball together. So, I mean, seeing that it was definitely one of those things you don't expect. Just during that mountain visit, you weren't sure what was going to go on. I kind of thought Waino was going to talk Ollie into letting him finish that last inning, just because that's something, Waino's that has that mentality of, the traditional starter of, wanting to finish the inning. But seeing them exit at the same time is one of those moments, I mean, that you kind of look back on as like, wow, this kind of was almost like a changing of the guard, just because, I mean, these guys are, kind of on their way out. Like I said, Adam Wainwright, no one knows what his status is. He knows probably what his status is for next season and beyond. But seeing those 3 exit at the same time is also one of those moments where it's like, wow, like, I mean, it's kind of like a movie made type moment.
Yeah. Like, to me, it kind of reminded me like very much of like San Antonio Spurs-esque moment, right? With Manu, Tim, and Tony, because it's like, you have 3 people who have like defined a whole, decade of success, and they're all, kind of leaving. Well, we don't know. Again, like you said, we don't know if Waino's leaving or not. But like you said,
it's really an end. Like you said, it's kind of the end of an era. Who defined, that period of time for, like you said, for Spurs basketball. And this is the end of this era for Cardinals baseball.
Yeah, certainly. So, like you said, this is you've been covering MLB for a bit. You gotten a chance to go to all these ballparks. What's the best ballpark to be at as a fan, and which one is the best to be at as a media member?
You're probably going to hate me for this one. Sorry. As a fan, I mean, as far as covering, the media one will be easier to answer, just because I've only been to, I guess if you count like Roger Dean Stadium where the Cardinals spring training is, I mean, I guess it would be 5 ballparks, but I only count 4 big league ones. So obviously Angel Stadium, Dodger Stadium, Petco Park, and Busch Stadium. Oh man, I think Cardinal fans would hate me if I heard if I said this too. But okay, you know what? I think at least in the last few years, the top 2 for sure fan experience ballparks has to be Dodger Stadium and Busch Stadium, just because of obviously the history of those two franchises and where those franchises are at in terms of the kind of success they've had in the last few years. Dodger Stadium has just like this crazy vibe. I mean, it's one of the four, it's the third oldest active ballpark, with obviously Wrigley and Fenway being ahead of it. But Dodger Stadium is just, it's just one of those things where like you do, I mean, I know people complain, people don't show up on time, people leave early, but I mean, the Dodgers are trying, are one of the best teams in not just the National League, but in all of baseball. And the fans understand that. And the games are lively. At any moment, the Dodgers are down. I mean, I remember being at covering Dodger games last year. And, at any moment, I mean, the team can just kind of go off on offense. But I mean, Busch Stadium is also in that same, has that same vibe where you see the nods to history throughout the ballpark. You see all the statues of the Cardinal Hall of Famers outside, not Cardinal, but MLB Hall of Famers who went in as Cardinals. You see all of that, and I mean, especially this last year has made that feel even more special, just because of like what's going on with Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina. So I mean, I guess it's kind of a tie between those two as from a fan's perspective. I mean, obviously, I grew up an Angels fan and always loved going to games. But I mean, the on-field product was, aside from Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, I mean, there isn't a whole lot else to kind of get excited about. Petco Park, I mean, I went to not a lot of games. I went to a few games, when I was in junior high and high school. Really, I feel disappointed. I only went to one game when I was at SDSU, and that was with Luis. And that was obviously before the Brown came in. That was, 2019. So there was a whole different vibe at that ballpark. But obviously great food, great atmosphere there. Now, when it comes to covering a game, to me, I guess I have two different answers as well for that one. I mean, covering a game at Angel Stadium, the first game I covered, is special to me just because that was the ballpark I grew up going to. So being able to be in that press box and cover baseball there it was something I never thought would happen, and something that I did feel like was special. But when it comes to the best, it has to be Busch Stadium, just because being a part of the Post-Dispatch and knowing Cardinals history and the way that the Post-Dispatch has covered the Cardinals, I guess it gives it like a little bit more meaning to me, just because, I mean, the Bob Brogue, Rick Hummel press box, which is named there. I mean, I literally got to sit next to Rick Hummel, who's retiring this season from the Post-Dispatch. He's covered baseball for 51 years. He's been on the Cardinals beat for 50 of those. He's a National Baseball Hall of Fame inducts reporters and writers, and he is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Bob Brogue was an editor for the Post-Dispatch and is also in the Hall of Fame and has, they share that press box name. So, I mean, just being there and understanding kind of the expectations of not just the Post-Dispatch, but like the entire Cardinals beat. I mean, there's a lot of fans who are very interested and read a lot. So, I mean, there's a lot of expectations there. I mean, it was special there. I mean, obviously I got to give a nod to the Vin Scully press box at Dodger Stadium. Covering games there was really cool. But I mean, like I said, I mean, you see the nods to the Cardinals' history around St. Louis, and you also see the nods to history to the reporters, because, I mean, they acknowledge that, and it's something that's respected. I mean, even yesterday, like you said, when the Albert Pujols Yadier Molina ceremony, after that, we had our own ceremony. I mean, not a ceremony. We had a little celebration for Rick Hummel. Took a group photo, and as we're kind of giving him a round of applause, congratulating him, 51 years of the Post-Dispatch. I mean, fans below us turned around and cheered and congratulated him, just because.
Wow.
I mean, how many places do you know that fans acknowledge the beat writers?
Not very many.
But I mean, he has left a legacy. I mean, he's still going to be covering games. He'll still be at home games and still be at spring training. But just he's retiring from the Cardinals beat things, beat as a whole. So I mean, yeah. I mean, being able to kind of take in a little bit of what this person is, I've been able to call a colleague and a coworker, has been able to do over the last 50 years. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's one of those things that, he's one of the greatest of all time, and I'm lucky to have shared a press box with him.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, like in those moments, like when you get to work with people that have been doing this for so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like be getting to work with Darnay and people like OC and all these other people, and then you with Rick Hummel and all these others. Like, how important do you feel like it is for young journalists today to just kind of get, like you said, that word of networking? Like, how important is that nowadays?
It's weird. So I always, that was the one thing I was always bad at, is networking. Just because I'm terrible when it comes to like social situations. But I would say it's not just networking. I would say it's also getting close to the people you're working with, and not just because like you're trying to move up in your career, but also because, I mean, a lot of people are really, really good people, and they're always willing to help. And that was one of the things that I saw last year at MLB.com, and even going back to the NBC. I mean, guys like Darnay, guys like Derek Togerson, Fernando Ramirez, who's is now covering the Chargers, OC. I mean, a lot of other people. I mean, Becky Schildhouse, who was a producer there. A lot of them were always willing to help me out and give me tips. I was just always so hesitant to ask for that help, just because I didn't want to make it seem like I didn't know what I was doing or was lost. But even last year at MLB.com, some guys like Juan Toribio, who covers the Dodgers for them, Jesse Sanchez, who, like, if you're talking about Latinos who have covered baseball, I mean, at least Latino baseball writers, he is like on the Mount Rushmore of things. I mean, he's one of really the forefathers for us. And he served in this mentor role for me. I mean, he's one of the national writers there, and he was huge. And it wasn't just networking, trying to get to know Jesse. It was learning from him and asking questions. And that's what I've seen here. I mean, Rick Hummel, I mean, he's, like I mentioned, 50 years at the Post-Dispatch, 51 years at the Post-Dispatch. And then, next to him is Derek Gould, who's been on the Cardinals beat since, I think, 2004 or 2003. One of the top baseball writers in the country. And next to him, Ben Fredrickson, who's one of our top columnists here. And next to him, Benjamin Hockman, who's another one of our top columnists. And, they've won a bunch of awards. And being able to not just like network to know them, but network. Well, I mean, obviously, networking is huge, but it's like now I'm not networking with them. I'm learning from them. I mean, there's some of the people who have made this transition going from Anaheim to St. Louis a lot easier. I mean, they've not just in a reporter work aspect have they helped me. It's also just kind of in a lot of ways a personal life aspect. But I mean, yeah, I mean, being able to get to know the people you're working with. I mean, especially here where it's like I'm working with like all these people who are on the Post-Dispatch, but also, next to me, it's like Katie Wu from The Athletic and John Denton from MLB.com, and they have, experiences covering stuff. And, I've gotten to know them, and they're people who, I get along with really well, and, we're friends of mine. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people just because maybe they don't work for the same paper or for the same news station as you, but there are people who are always willing to help if you have questions. But yeah, I mean, networking in general is going to be huge for young reporters. I mean, like I said, that was one of the things that I always felt bad at. I mean, I never really did go to like those networking events, and I do regret a little part of that. And it was just because like I always felt out of place. I felt like I never belonged. I still feel like that sometimes, where I mean, like, what the heck am I doing here? But I mean, yeah, that's obviously a huge thing.
Yeah, and I would agree too, because it was like, at least for me, when I wanted to be a producer, like I had, I was talking to people like Darnay, talking to people like OC, they, shadowing them while they're boothing the shows. I'm helping produce the show, like all these little things, and, them kind of throwing me into the ringer where I'm producing like the 11 o'clock, midday, mornings, all that, all these different shows. And I feel like, again, not just about, getting close with the people that you work with, but also like just the idea of consistently getting better at what you're doing, whether that's like leveling up and like telling people your intentions, I think is the biggest thing too, because sometimes people may feel like they're too coy or too, they may be a little shy to ask for help, but I feel like that's like one of the most important things you can do in this field, right? Is just to ask for help.
Oh yeah. I mean, I hope like whoever listens to this doesn't take it the wrong way, but we don't know everything. I mean, especially us who have graduated in the last couple of years. I mean, people who have even, people who are just still finding their footing in the business. Like, we don't know. We don't have the answers to everything. We don't have all the experience to to figure things out. So I mean, asking questions isn't a bad thing. It's not a negative thing that reflects upon you. It's actually a positive thing, just because you're showing that you want help, or you're showing that you're open to help, and that you want to learn. And that's the biggest thing, especially for the way I've kind of approached things, is just trying to learn as much as I can. I know there's a lot of areas I need to get better in. There's a lot of growth for me that I need to get to at some point. And I'm hopefully, I know it's going to take a process to be better. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's always people that are going to help you, and there's always people who have tons of experience. I mean, even like the little things that sound dumb, I always kind of preface my questions like to Derek Gould, our lead writer, and say, hey, this might be a dumb question. And he's like, don't worry, it's not dumb. Just because I think it's dumb, but to him, he's like, no, like, it's a good thing. I mean, it might sound dumb to me, but it's a valid question, and one that, is worth asking. So anytime, I've ever needed help or anything, I mean, it's good to have resources around you. And same thing, I mean, not just the people who I work with and sit next to, but also the people who I've met, over the last couple of years. I mean, people who, same thing, like Jesse Sanchez, I know I can reach out to him whenever, and he'll always help me. I know there's other reporters who I've met that I can reach out to at any point. And, if I have a question, they'll do their best to answer and help me out.
Yeah, certainly. And like, take me through what it's like to cover the Cardinals minor league team and just that whole system. Like what does a typical reporting day look like for you?
I guess it depends. I mean, there's really not like one set day. Some days, like today, for example, where the Cardinals are on the road. So, I mean, I'm not going to be at any stadium. I'm not on the road covering minor leagues right now. I mean, the minor league season's actually over, and now the fall league starting today, which for those that don't know about the Arizona Fall League, it's usually like a short season league. A lot of teams send about I think they send about 6 to 7 prospects, play like a 40-something game season. So like today, for example, I have some features that I'm working on. Also, going to be writing some updates about the Cardinals prospects that are playing today, because today's their Arizona Fall League opening day. Days that that I'm at the ballpark, it's the same thing. Go early. Be there for pregame availability. Usually, I'll write my minor league stuff from there. If something comes up that we can write a cider on, I'll try to do my best to get that done. I'll help run quotes. That's kind of the approach that we take. I mean, usually there's 4 people from the Post-Dispatch at any given Cardinals game. So, I mean, if something like yesterday happens where we know we need to get Yadi, Waino, and Albert post-game, that's something we know, like, hey, if somebody, if Rick is talking to Waino and Albert decides to talk and there's a scrum over there, somebody has to get over there. If Yadi decides to talk, which it's kind of weird because our lockers are right next to each other. But I mean, if, you gotta make sure we have all our bases covered. So, I mean, obviously, we go to the game, cover the game, I guess. I mean, I don't, cover, write the game story, but I mean, I'm there. I mean, covering it, I guess, as well, helping out with post-game quotes. Then same thing, we'll get back to the press box post-game. I'll transcribe whatever I need to send over to Rick or Derek. And then usually I'll finish my minor league stuff there and then come back to my apartment and kind of do that same thing the next day. Until, like I said, a day like today, I'll kind of just write from home, get my feature done to be published tomorrow. Days that I've gotten to go on the road to cover the minor leagues, I mean, it's a little bit different, obviously. Well, I guess not a little bit different. I mean, it's the same, basically, like that same layout of covering, like going to a major league game, just minor league ballpark. I mean, usually I'm trying to talk to as many guys as I can just to kind of get stuff saved up, get quotes and stories saved up that I can write over the next couple of weeks. Then obviously some days are different where, we do a minor league podcast. So, I mean, going to the studio to record, go into our newsroom and we have like a little makeshift, well, not makeshift, we have like a podcast studio, I guess. But yeah, going to record that. And I guess, those are, the 3 typical types of days. So, yeah, it's a lot of nights. It's a lot of transcribing, a lot of just writing in general, which, I like to do. So I guess that's kind of it. there's no like really set formula. I mean, especially like now with the next couple weeks of the playoffs. I mean, we could have 2 home games at Busch Stadium and that's it. Or these guys could be playing deep into not deep into November, but deep in October and the start of November if they get to the World Series. So I mean, it's weird because like it's kind of a point in the season where you kind of don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of days. So I mean, you just kind of have to be ready.
Yeah. I'm like you said, it was kind of funny. I felt the same sort of way at NBC the past couple of days because it was like we weren't sure when the Padres were going to clinch because, the magic number was at 3 and then it dropped to 1. And so we were like, oh, they could have, they could clinch on Thursday. They could clinch on Friday. They could clinch on Saturday. Obviously, none of those 3 things happened because they ended up clinching yesterday on Sunday. But like you said, we kind of have to be prepared for those moments because it's like we might have to send Derek and a photog out to Petco to do these things. We might have to, have Darnay front something in house, in the A block or something like that, like all these sorts of things. And even when I was doing sports wrap yesterday, like we had all these things fleshed out for the show, but we had to, Derek sends all of his elements later from the clubhouse. And so that completely changes everything as far as formatting for how we went about the Padres. And so, like you said, I feel like there's a similarity in that aspect of like with the postseason and with these games and these sort of late season things that like nothing's ever sort of set right in your sort of schedule. Like everything's kind of just spontaneous on the day of kind of planning, you feel like.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the advice that I've been given is, you can't really come to the ballpark without a plan because obviously, like if you're the main writer for that day, if you're on the notes and you're on the gamer, I mean, you have to know what's going to be in your notebook, or maybe you don't know what's in your notebook, but you have ideas of what you're going to write about. So I mean, you have to come with a game plan. You have to come prepared with questions. It's something being preparation is something that I'm still trying to work on to get better at. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's some days where it's like, oh hey, Ollie's going to be Oliver Marmol. He's going to be available at 3:30, and some days it's like, oh, well, he's not available until like 4:15, and you're just kind of gauging, how pregame's going to go. Same thing, postgame, you don't know what's ever going to happen. I remember same thing. We kind of had a plan of, all right, if Pujols gets to 700 here at Busch Stadium, how are we going to go about it? I mean, because obviously, either Derek or Rick's going to be the lead writer that day. Then we had, special call-ins that were going to go up that did go up, obviously, now that he's hit 700. We also, had a plan of, if they clinch at home, what's that going to look like? But I mean, they clinched on the road. So, Derek, got the job. I mean, he's one of the best in the business and he got the job. I mean, did a spectacular job. And the same thing with the postseason. I mean, now, like the other day, we kind of like got our assignments of what we're going to do. So like, I don't know what I'll be doing. Everybody kind of knows what the role they're going to play in. But I mean, you never know what can happen. I mean, what if Miles Michaelis takes the ball in game 1 for the Cardinals and throws a no-hitter against whoever they play? I mean, things change. I mean, then, there's no, I feel like you can go in with the plan. I think sports are so weird because like you can go in with the plan I guess news, I mean, not, I guess, I mean, it's true. I mean, news, you never know what can happen, but I mean, yeah, there were days, at the ballpark, you go in kind of knowing what to do or expecting something and the unexpected happens. I mean, even last year, one of the games that I covered at Petco Park, Padres were down 8-0. They had gotten pummeled, I'd say, by the Nationals the day before. It was like a 15-1 game. Chris Paddock just kind of blew up. And then, they're down 8-0 to the Nationals again. And Fernando Tatis hits like a 3-run homer. And, a few at-bats later, Daniel Camarena, rookie reliever, comes up and hits a grand slam. And there's an in-game story I write about that. And then, obviously, the Padres make that insane comeback. So it's like, okay, now you went into the day, like, okay, you had whatever, filed the notes, had the Padres notebook go up, and then you had this Tatis thing, and it's like, okay, I think we kind of need like an in-game story on that just because it's Fernando Tatis hitting a homer. Everybody's going to want to click and view the homer and read about it. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like this rookie reliever just hit a grand slam off of Max Scherzer, who's a future Hall of Famer, with the Padres down 8-0, and they just created this comeback. So they do that. And then post-game, it's like Yu Darvish also got hurt that game. So now there's like a Yu Darvish update, and it's like, man, like you come in thinking like, oh, there's probably only going to be like a couple things written today, and now it's like we have 4 different headlines on our website.
Yeah.
And obviously, like being around one team all season long, you see that as well, where Sunday night baseball with I can't remember who pitched that game, but Giants Cardinals, and it's a blowout, and all of a sudden Albert Pujols steps onto the mound and starts pitching, and it's like, well, okay, we definitely need something on that. So I mean, you always can go into the plan, but I mean, as you know, I mean, being a producer, news happens, things change, and some days you're right, some days it's some days you show up to the ballpark and it's a 4-0 game where the Cardinals only had 2 hits and didn't look good, and other days you show up and they blow out the Giants and Albert Pujols pitches.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of illustrative of the spontaneity of this whole field, regardless of whether you're in news or sports, right? Because it's like you could have something set, like for example, Thursday or Wednesday, I had everything set for my 11 p.m. show, and then all of a sudden, 10:23, we get a breaker with a hazmat situation at UCSD. You got to send our reporter there for a live hit at the top of the show. Then, later as the show's starting, they're having IFB issues, so we have to float them out, move them down, or whatever. All this sort of things that you like kind of have to pre-plan for, but also there's that spontaneity, and it's just kind of like, I feel like for a lot of younger journalists, it's like you have to be kind of prepared for those moments, like, because when they happen, you got to just have a game plan for them. You got to just go and go and go, and whether it's rocky or not, I think just having a plan in mind in those situations, I think is important for a lot of young journalists. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, obviously having a plan. I would assume. Actually, this is a question I asked for Como the other day. Like, do the seasons get easier as they go on? And he said, I mean, some seasons are different. He's like, this one's different, obviously, with all the Pujols and Waino stuff and Pujols Yachty stuff. But I mean, the way he described it to me is that you learn more about yourself as the seasons go on and as the game, seasons progress. And I would assume a part of that is understanding how to adjust to those situations. Because I think you can game plan as long as you want, but I mean, like you said, I mean, you could show up to the newsroom one day and a plane crashes in Santee and kills someone. I mean, you can show up to the ballpark one day and Albert Pujols, I mean, obviously you plan ahead for Albert Pujols' 700th home run, but you could show up to the ballpark one day and Miles Michaelis carries a no-hitter through 8 2/3 innings, and then obviously doesn't get it. But I mean, you never know what can happen. And I would assume, with more experience, yeah, I mean, you don't have a game plan, but you understand how to go about those things and how to cover those things just because you've been around it for so long. So, I mean, that's something that I would assume. I mean, kind of like that piece of advice I said, you learn more about yourself. So, I mean, I feel like, if hopefully, if, we both have long, successful careers in journalism, and, eventually we're talking about, like, remember how worried we got when this happened, and now it's like, okay, yeah, it happened, and you're kind of like, oh man, it's happening, but you know how to go about it.
Yeah, certainly, no doubt about it. Now I want to kind of get into the postseason, because obviously the wild card games for the National League and American League start on Friday this weekend. I mean, man, talk about a quick turnaround, right? I mean, the Padres' last game of the season is on Wednesday, then they have a wild card game coming to them on Fridays. We only got a 1-game turnaround, but I just wanted to share a little bit of the standings right now. So let me get these standings pulled up here. Obviously, we got the postseason picture right now. The Cardinals are sitting at that 3rd seed, possibly playing Philadelphia in this wild card. Now things are a little bit fluid because right now Atlanta holds the lead for that 2 spot, and the Mets are kind of locked in with the Padres in this 4-5 for the wild card. Phillies are still not locked in for that 6th seed. How do you kind of see things playing out with this wild card spot? Like, do you see possibly the Cardinals playing the Phillies, the Brewers, or do you see the Padres kind of falling in a bit for that 6th spot?
Man, I mean, the Phillies have kind of been on the decline. They took the last couple games that they played against Washington. But I mean, I really don't think what can go on when it comes to the last few games of the season. Obviously, I think you as a Padres fan understand that being, 2010, obviously Padres needing one win, get swept by the Giants in San Francisco, and the Giants go on to win the World Series that year as the last wildcard team, or as the only wildcard team because there was only one wildcard spot at the time. But the Phillies, they kind of have been on a slide, and the thing that's benefited them is that Milwaukee's also on a huge slide. They came into the year possibly contending for the division. They won the NL Central last year and had a lot of those key pieces coming back. Obviously, things have not gone their way, especially after the trade deadline when they moved Josh Hader, who was also kind of struggled, but looked better as a Padre of late. I would assume it's going to be the Phillies in that 6 seed, or in that 6 seed coming to St. Louis, just because. Just kind of, I guess, when you look at the playoff odds, it kind of lines up that way. But they do play their last 3 games against Houston. Houston's locked into the 1 seed, I think, throughout the American League side of the playoffs. So, the Dodgers are going to be the top overall team. If they get to the World Series, they'll have home field advantage all the way through. But I think you're still going to be scoreboard watching. Obviously, there's still ground that Milwaukee can make up to slide into that 6 seed. The Padres are in a really good position, obviously, to get into that. But and they're going to play. If they do and they end up as a 5 and play New York, man, that's going to be an interesting series. Just because the Mets in the offseason built this World Series caliber team, showed that they could be this World Series caliber team, and have been on a decline as well. They just got swept by Atlanta, lost a huge series there. But yeah, I'm fully expecting the Phillies to make that 6 seed, just because, obviously they're in the driver's seat to claim that last playoff spot. But it's almost. It sounds dumb because it's like it's almost October, but like it literally is October. So it's postseason's a few days away, and that's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with this bracket here, and we'll have it pulled up here. But I think it's interesting because I feel like the Cardinals are set up in a good position because they're not playing the Dodgers, who are, I think clear cut just in the league of their own in this sort of division, right? But I think they're playing the Braves. They got they could expect to play the Phillies in that 6 seed, and they have the Braves. They could set up an interesting championship series if they end up making it, because they could play the Dodgers. The Padres, I think, are really set up to do well in this wild card matchup, especially if they play the Mets. Like you said, they've been on the decline. And I feel like if you're the Mets, this is a team that you don't want to be playing with the Padres, right?
With the way the Padres pitching has been of late, it's been better. I know Blake Snell was inconsistent to begin the year. Yu Darvish has also kind of been better lately. You look at their starting pitching, and obviously Joe Musgrove, who's an all-star this year. So, that first round, it's a 3-game series. So, you have to be smart with who gets a starting job in game 1 and 2. I think particularly game 1, because that you control the series, and obviously it's in your favor. But the Padres are a team that's played better of late. They're a team that when you look at playoff contenders, who knows? It's the playoffs. Anybody can catch fire. Anybody can do anything. Going back to like what you said about the Cardinals having an easier path if they have to go through Atlanta. Atlanta's a tough team. Their lineup is one of the best lineups in all of baseball. And their pitching as well. Spencer Strider, who's a rookie. The Cardinals cannot figure him out. They faced him twice this year and did not look good against him. Obviously, the Atlanta bullpen's really good. They added Raisel Iglesias at the deadline, who's been really good for them. But it's so weird. It's so weird because I know the Dodgers are still the best team in baseball record wise, and you can make the argument on paper. Obviously, record speaks for itself. But you look at their starting pitching options, and a lot of them have been turned upside down in a sense because of injuries. Clayton Kershaw did return. So obviously he kind of set to make an impact there in the postseason. But I mean, it's going to be a tough field whichever way you go about it. But it's funny because even like yesterday, Cardinal manager Ollie Marmol was, he's been asked a lot about, who's going to get the ball in game one. I mean, there's a lot of options that the Cardinals do have, which is weird because like you would think Adam Wainwright could be that guy in game one, but I mean, there's a possibility he might not even start in game 1, 2, or 3 if they get to that point, just because he's been through this dead arm phase and he's been inconsistent of late. So, I mean, there are a lot of options, but it's like the point that he made and the point that I'm trying to get to, but I keep talking way too much, that, you can project and kind of plan out what you want to do for the NLCS and NLDS if, kind of, what would your rotation look like if you get there, but you have to get there at first. I mean, you can look at it whatever way you want. The Cardinals can say, well, we're going to pitch so-and-so in game 1 and 2 against Atlanta if things line up, but things have to line up and you have to get past that first round.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What do you kind of expect to see from the Cardinals in this postseason? Do you feel like they could have a chance to make it very far?
Man, I mean, so there's no logic behind this. There's no stats to back this up, but I've always felt like there's a team in the playoffs every year that's like almost not a team of destiny, but like that storybook team. I always made this joke that Eagles Super Bowl run where they didn't have Carson Wentz, but it's like, man, this team has kind of withstood it all. This is like the team of destiny. Same thing, the Astros in 2017, say what you will, but I mean, it's like the storybook part about Hurricane Harvey and all that. I mean, and now you have like this same thing with Atlanta. You had like that story, even last year, you had that storybook team of they lost Ronald Acuna and patched their outfield together with three guys at the deadline that they traded for who weren't commodities and became commodities with the Braves. So when I look at the Cardinals team, obviously, they have guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, who are going to finish most likely 1 and 2 in MVP voting for the National League. You have guys like Miles Michaelis, who was an all-star this year, Ryan Helsley, who's one of the top closers in all of baseball, Brendan Donovan, who is a utility rookie, who I don't think would win Rookie of the Year, but I mean, he's going to get Rookie of the Year votes. So, I mean, you look at the team, and there are a lot of pieces around there, and that's just to name a few, because there have been other guys who have played well and contributed well, like Jose Quintana, Jordan Montgomery, who they got at the deadline. But then you look at, like, the 3, I guess, Cardinal icons that they had and they celebrated this past, or 2 that they celebrated and the 3rd who exited the field together with them on Sunday. And I mean, you almost get the sense like there's going to be some magic in October. I don't know how far magic can take you, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like if there's a storybook ending, I mean, they've kind of had this storybook season, Albert Pujols getting the 700 home runs, Yadier Molina setting the MLB record for all-time starts as a battery with Adam Wainwright. I mean, that's a record that's never going to be broken in baseball. Same thing, Yadier Molina. I mean, moving up on the list on games caught with most. I think he has the most putouts in all of MLB history now. So I mean, these guys have set records all year. These guys have had these memorable moments. Who knows if that magic continues in October? I mean, there's possibility just because, I mean, there's a lot of emotion in it. I mean, it's sometimes just obviously it's who performs and who doesn't, but it's like who can step up when the moment's the biggest. And we've seen, I mean, especially in the regular season, that there have been Cardinals who have stepped up when the moment's the biggest. I mean, Albert Pujols has been a big part of that run. Paul Goldschmidt, I mean, who kind of had a bad September, picking it up a little bit. I mean, anytime the Cardinals needed a big hit, he was there to provide that. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, this Cardinals team on paper, I mean, it doesn't have, the 6 or 7 All-Stars that the Yankees had this season, or same thing with the Dodgers. Even yesterday it was talked about where the Cardinals don't have this frontline ace. They don't, they don't have a Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom. Yeah. But they have a lot of guys who are solid 2s and 3s who have been insanely effective and really good for them over the last month, and really pitched to their style just because the Cardinals are a team that tries to get the ball on the ground. They rely on their defense. I mean, then obviously you saw that last year. They had 5 Gold Glovers. I think the first team to get a team Gold Glove award. So I mean, there's still solid defenders around the field. Yeah, and they pitched well in the organization and kind of with that strategy. But I mean, yeah, you look at the team on paper, and you might not say like, well, I mean, this lineup doesn't compare to Atlanta, or this lineup doesn't compare to Houston. But I mean, it's a team that has stepped up when the moment's needed it, and they've had players who have stepped up. So I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it just, I remember hearing, I think when they clinched, they had a video of Albert Pujols on Twitter saying like, oh, this is just the beginning. Like, we're not done yet. You know, we're just getting started or something like that. And I was like, you know, you mix that with just that whole, you know, it being Yachty's last year, it being Pujols' last year, and then the possibility of Waino's last year. Like, just that, you know, like you said, it almost feels storybook to say that they, you know, that why not them, right? Or why not them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that literally, like, why? I mean, there's no, I mean, it's same thing. It's like people say, like, if you tried to pitch this movie to some production studio, they'd say like, that's too corny. Like, how can you end it like that? Like, nobody's going to believe it. But I mean, it's had the makings of that. So, I mean, I think a big part of it will be how if their lineup shows up. I mean, that was over the last couple of weeks, it's been very inconsistent. So, I mean, there's going to be a need for that, especially.
Yeah, for sure. And who do you kind of expect to see making it to this World Series this year? Because it's like a lot of things can happen, but who do you see?
Man, I know I would imagine Major League Baseball has wanted this for the longest time. But I would not be surprised if we get a Yankees-Dodgers World Series. I know a lot of people might cringe and might be like, ugh, like really? Like those two teams? But I mean, you've seen the year that Aaron Judge has had. It's been amazing. I mean, it's been insane. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there's a possibility of that. And it's another one of those things where like they've kind of the Yankees have had inconsistencies over the last couple of years, but they have guys who are really good. I mean, guys who on paper, who you look at as like top caliber talent. I mean, Nestor Cortez, Nasty Nestor, has been really good this year as a starter. Garrett Cole, you know, who's struggled a little bit, but I mean, it's Garrett Cole. He still had, I mean, still Garrett Cole. I mean, one of the top pitchers in baseball over the last couple of years. But I mean, same time, I would not be surprised if we get, you know, that 2017 World Series rematch, the one that a lot of people have been waiting for, if we see Astros, Dodgers again. And I mean, we might see Astro. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's a lot of talent across the field when you look at the postseason rosters. You never know who can catch fire. I mean, who knows? We might be talking about a Seattle-Philadelphia World Series. I mean, just because it's the playoffs, I mean, anything can happen.
Yeah, I think it would be poetic if we ended up with like a Cardinals-Mariners World Series. You know, two teams that like Mariners, playoff drought finally broken. Cardinals, this long-standing dynasty of success. I just think it would be fitting. That would kind of be like my sort of fun World Series pick.
I don't know. We might see Padres, Mariners, two teams that have never gotten it done in the World Series. I mean, Mariners have never been to the World Series, but it's like two playoff-starved franchises battling it out. I mean, you never know what can happen. I mean, it's October. Yeah,
this is the best part of baseball is just October playoff season. I think my pick for the World Series would not surprise me. I would say Braves and Astros with Atlanta repeating. It would not surprise me to see that. I mean, Houston's had a phenomenal year. Atlanta's looked really solid. They've really started ramping it up of late. Mm-hmm. And obviously the Dodgers, I think they've been one of the most premier primetime teams in all of baseball, especially, you know, when they 100 plus wins or whatever. But the thing is that, like you said, that the Dodgers have had a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to the playoffs. And we've had that, you know, come to fruition in the past. And it wouldn't surprise me to see the Dodgers kind of fade out in the NLCS or even in the divisional round, depending on who they play. But I would expect to see the Astros and the Braves, maybe with Atlanta repeating again.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Atlanta get there. And But I mean, like I said, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if St. Louis got there. I mean, because I mean, I know we talked about like inconsistencies throughout the lineup, but I mean, even when you look at how well they've played after the All-Star break, in a sense, so at the same time, like they've played up to their competition and have played down to it. I mean, they've looked bad against Cincinnati, but they've also looked good against Atlanta. They swept the Yankees here at Busch Stadium in August. I mean, so they've showed that they can be, that World Series caliber team. Obviously they're a playoff caliber division winning team. I mean, it just all depends who shows up and who doesn't when the lights get the brightest.
Yeah, certainly. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So now, before I wrap this up, I wanted to ask you a few fun questions here.
Cool. I'll try to have some fun answers.
If you were to have any other job outside of journalism, what would it be and why?
Man, I mean, I don't know, just because I'll have to take a minute to think about it, just because I've never wanted to do anything other than baseball reporting. So, I mean, it feels like a dream, and I feel lucky. And I don't know. I hope, like you said, you read that Charlie Morton, not Charlie Morton, but like that Cardinals story with Charlie Morton, Ronald Acuna, Nelson Cruz, like a bunch of other players from around the league on Albert Pujols and Yachty. But the way Charlie Morton played, he's like, when he was a rookie, he was just trying to survive in the league. And I feel like that, like I'm just trying to survive in baseball reporting, just because, I hope to do this as long as I can. But when it comes to something outside of journalism that I would do, does it have to be realistic, or can it be like,
anything really?
If there was a way to give back, if there was a job that I could do that kind of gives back to my community, back home, and just kind of help people, and just kind of, I'm not sure which, because it's like I've never like been somebody who's like a leader or somebody who's like the most vocal. But if there was a role that I can help to kind of bridge the gap between like Spanish speaking communities and just kind of some of the difficulties they face, I mean, there's something that I would definitely do, just because I feel like as people, like we should obviously give back and help people as much as we can. And if there was a way to kind of help bridge the gaps and like the inequalities there, I mean, there's something that I definitely would like to do. I mean, if it was outside of journalism, like I'm not, like I said, I'm not like any type of leader or anybody who's ever been in that, like that type of person. But if there was ever a role to do that, to kind of help build up the community, I mean, there's something that I would do definitely.
I think for me, I would, and I always tell people this, I was like, if I were to not have a job in journalism, I for sure would want to be a basketball coach, because I could see myself coaching. When I was a kid, that was what I kind of wanted to do outside of journalism, was to be a basketball coach, so I could kind of see myself. So that's what my job would be, would be to be a basketball coach, or a coach somewhere. I don't know what sport. I don't think it would matter, but that's what I would be a coach.
You got to start taking lessons from you then. I mean, my 3-point shot is terrible.
Yeah, I don't know if I could fix. I don't know if I could fix like jump shooting, but I mean, but yeah, I would be a coach. And now, if you were to have a job in journalism outside of the job that you have now, what would it be and why?
Do I have to answer that? Like I said, there's literally nothing else that I'd rather be doing. That was a question I had to kind of answer. Like I asked myself, that I had to figure out, like, is doing what I'm doing now, or in a similar role covering baseball, whatever it may be, at whatever level. I mean, same thing, like, do I want to cover baseball? I'm like, yeah, it was a no-brainer. It's like, like there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. But outside of this, in journalism, man, there's not really anything that is always, and it's no disrespect to anybody who does other stuff in journalism. I mean, there's just nothing else that has really been like insanely appealing to me. Well, I mean, I guess like in that same sense, what I said earlier about kind of helping, like giving back to the community. I do think there's an insanely huge value with local reporting and reporting within your community, like stuff like what Andrea Lopez Villafana does. I mean, what other talented reporters do, especially with Spanish-speaking communities. I think if there was something ever there, I mean, that like there's not really another sport that I want to cover. There's not really any other role. Like I've never, like it's not like I want to be like an on-air reporter or a radio host or producer. But I mean, if there was ever a way to highlight the Spanish-speaking communities that, you know, we've grown up in and live in, and, you know, be a voice for them. That's something that definitely has always, like I said, has always been important to me. It's something I've never felt like I could live up to the task of, just because they're obviously, you know, people way more talented, way better than me. But I mean, people who serve them right, and that's something that, you know, outside of baseball reporting, I'd say that.
Yeah, I think for me, I would either be a basketball or maybe even a women's soccer reporter or something like that.
That'd be cool.
Because those are the two of the sports like I really love doing, and I even love doing it when I was at the DA. And you know, if I ever had the chance to, I would get those. And of course, but I love the job that I do now. I mean, because I just get you get, at least in my sense, like as a producer, you get all the control over how you make this show happen. And like you said, I feel like even though our positions are different, with you being a baseball writer and me being a producer, there's sort of similarities in principles in that you get the creative liberty to do what you want. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, what's great about especially the role that I've been in and the editors that I work with and just the paper in general, it's not like you're limited. It's not like they tell me like, hey, you can't do Cardinal stuff. I mean, you're a minor league guy, like do that. Like I've been told like, hey, like any stories you want to write, any stories you think would be good for the web or the paper, you know, that's not on the minor league side and you want to pitch something, like go for it. I mean, do it. So I mean, yeah, like there's a lot of freedom for creativity. And then even when it's like writing, it's not like they say, hey, like, why are you writing about this topic? I mean, if it's something that, you know, readers would think are important or readers would find interesting, like go for it. I mean, if you want to get funky with your lead and kind of do something there, I mean, it's not like I've been put like in a box or have been limited in what I can do. Same thing with like our long, like the big projects that we have, like that Pujols Molina special issue, that a lot of our, you know, reporters can lead. It's not like it's not like you're limited in what you can do. So I mean, I definitely see that aspect of it. I mean, like you said, I mean, you're in charge of the show. There's something that you like, something that you see, a way you want to approach it. I mean, it's all you. I mean, literally, yeah, it's all you.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we close things out, any final words that you'd like to tell the listeners? Any last bits of advice? Anything like that?
I've never been one for advice. I mean, like I said, I've always been one who's trying to take as much advice as I can, just because I feel so new to this and I feel like there's a lot to learn. But I will say, I mean, if there's somebody listening who doesn't know what they want to do in journalism and maybe even in life, or maybe they're listening to this as they're sitting on campus at SDSU wondering if they should join the Daily Aztec or change out of the journalism major or do whatever it is, I would say just branch out and explore different things. There's no harm in not liking what you do or liking what you're doing at the moment. Because I've been in this stage. Nobody else, everybody has, I feel like at some point, been at a point in life where they're just trying to figure things out. I mean, I'm still trying to figure things out here. I mean, moving to the Midwest or just with this new job, I mean, there's a lot of questions you ask, of what, if what you're doing is the right thing, if you belong, if if you're doing good enough, if, this was the right move, if you should have done something else. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think you just got to explore different things and try out different things in order to find that answer. I feel lucky that I've answered some of those questions of, what I want to do. And if I've made the right choices. I mean, obviously there's choices that I regret, choices that I wish I would have done better, stories that I would have written better, stories that I would have been more on top of. But at the end of the day, I mean, the only way that I figured out that I wanted to do baseball reporting is by getting more involved with the things around me. Like I said, I mean, I knew I wanted to do something with baseball. I didn't know how I could do it, but the way I found it was through sports reporting at the community college level, and then at the four-year university level. I mean, covering college sports at both places. And I mean, I'll be honest, like I feel lucky to be in the position that I'm in. And I feel lucky that I've found the right fit for me. Just because, I mean, we know that, I mean, there are people who wrote for the DA, but I mean, they're the same thing. They're still trying to figure out life, and maybe journalism wasn't the thing that they really felt passionate about and felt like they wanted to do. And that's great because obviously they now know something that they didn't know before they got involved. And I think finding out who we are, finding out what we want to do is a very important aspect of not just professional life, but our personal lives, just because you want to do something that when you look back years from now. So like I kind of like mentioned, Rick Hummel as an example. Yeah. I mean, he's going to look, I mean, I don't know what goes on through his mind. I mean, I assume it's a lot of thoughts about baseball and a lot of thoughts about just people. I mean, he's a really super kind person. But I mean, it's not like you see any regret of like, man, I can't believe I spent 51 years inside a press box covering baseball. Yeah. It's like, man, like I got to spend that. And I feel lucky and thankful that I've been here for 1 year. So, I mean, and the only way that I got to this point is by trying out different things and figuring out what's going to work for me. And if you're in that stage where you're not sure what you want to do with life, I mean, sometimes you just got to take the leap. I mean, you don't know where you're going to land, but taking the leap's the biggest part.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would just say it's, of course, take chances. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the biggest thing. Sometimes I feel like I didn't ask enough questions, even though I'm at where I'm at now. And make sure that you make your intentions known to people that are in the field, because it's like you never know what connections people have with certain people, and they can get you places. If I would not have, known Jerry McCormick in my journalism class, he wouldn't have got me that connection to Greg Dawson at NBC mm-hmm. and all these other people. And so I feel like just, again, making sure to ask questions, making your intentions known to people about what you want to do in journalism. And of course, like, enjoy those little moments, because you never know where those might take you, right? Like, I never knew that this plane crash story would end up turning into an Emmy nomination, end up with me going to the ceremony and winning. Like, you never know where these things take you. And of course, it's to enjoy every moment. I mean,
definitely.
End, you have to, you're soak it in, because it's like, you never know when they may happen again. And every day is a treasure. And I would just say treasure every moment that you have in this business, because it's no 2 days are ever the same. And so I would say that, and of course, reach out to people for help.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, especially like people when you're in college. I mean, Jerry McCormick is, we talked about Magic McCormick, the GOAT, one of the best professors out there. I mean, best humans out there in general. Same thing, helped me get that season internship with MLB.com. And then everybody that I met there helped me get to here. And I mean, there's a lot of steps along the way. I mean, the path might not be a straight one, can be a winding one, could be one that start and stop. I mean, no two paths are the same. So definitely, like you said, enjoy every moment. I mean, just be, just enjoy every moment. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. Listeners, you can follow Daniel on Twitter at the Dan Guerrero. He's verified, by the way. He's verified. I think he's the only DA person out of the whole group that's verified. Maybe a couple other people, but
I'll say this, my 2 cents on verification. Twitter is not a real place. Twitter is a very important aspect to what we do. Sorry, I have a love-hate relationship with it. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
because, I mean, we can get caught up in the Twitter game of fastest fingers in the West or whatever you want to call it. And it's important, obviously, but check marks or not, I mean, nobody really cares about that. I'll be honest. I don't care. I mean, it helps obviously professionally. I only got it because the MLB social media team helped me before my internship ended. Because obviously people on Twitter look at you like, oh, this guy's like legit, not just some blogger.
Yeah.
But I mean, bloggers are legit too. And they're professional. They're Ryan Davish, who covers the Mariners for the Seattle Times and is one of the best baseball writers also in the country, doesn't have a Twitter verification. I mean, it's just one of those things. But I know there are other people who do. Charlie Vargas, I remember seeing, who's working for a SoCal News Group, has that. I mean, Brendan, I think Brendan has it. I saw him pop up on my timeline the other day. Tristy, I think, has it. Jocelyn. I mean, I keep up with what everybody's doing. So, I mean, but it doesn't, check mark or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you're doing good, you're doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. You can follow him on Twitter at the Dan Guerrero. Daniel, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite.